lovers, and welcome. I want to start off by saying I am so blessed to be in a position to suggest tips and tools and even products that can help you lead a tantric life of liberation and expansion. And one of my absolute favorite places to purchase spiritual and sexy items is Wands. Wands.com, spelled Wands. Wands sells, you guessed it, crystal pleasure wands, along with so much more, including yoni eggs, free bleed blankets, other amazing products for yoni steaming. I've been using these products and products similar to them for the better part of a decade, and they have been incredible allies in my journey of sexual healing and expanding my orgasmic potential. And I'm so grateful to be friends with the owner, Courtney. She's amazing. She has so generously provided us all with a discount code for 15% off, and that code is Leola. Leola. You can use it on their website, www.wands.com. Again, the code is Leola, Leola, for 15% off. I'll also make sure that this is linked in the show notes. So thank you for listening, and you're welcome for the inevitable pleasure and healing that is coming your way with these products. Now, let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome to Talk Tantra to Me. I am so grateful to be alive and here with you for another episode. This one is going to be another taboo talk. A couple months ago, I brought this concept to the podcast of Talk Taboo to Me because that's been something that's felt more alive and on brand. I love the idea of Talk Tantra to Me because it's so all-encompassing, but finding God and spirituality in the taboo places and alchemy and shadow work and exploring the dark masculine, the dark feminine, and finding God in the places that we've been told not to look has just been really what's been exciting and alive for me lately. And so I've been kind of since then playing with bringing more of my life to you guys. A lot of the content for the first, how long have we been doing this podcast? I don't know. I think almost 4 years. Really up until this spring, a lot of the content was more educational. And if you are looking for that type of content, go ahead and scroll back. There's tons of white tantric, red tantric, everything in between, sort of more sexy things, more spiritual things. If you scroll back, lots of awesome guests as well. If you're new to the podcast, I recommend just there's almost 200 episodes now. Just scroll through and read the titles, and whatever jumps out at you, whatever you feel your soul kind of purring to, give it a try, give it a listen. This episode is going to be juicy in a different way, in that I'm going to be sharing a little bit of what's been happening in my life lately, including some of the challenges, some of the things that I'm working through, and giving you real time, real life advice of how I've applied my work as a tantrika and my lifestyle as the choice of tantra, how I use those tools in the chaos of being a human. So there are three main things that I would like to bring to you today. And the first is my husband's bipolar 2 diagnosis. The second is my book launch, which happened, by the time this comes out, it'll have been about 2 weeks. Right now it's about 10 days since my book launch, time of recording. And then I also would like to share with you guys a little bit about body image and my body image, how my body image has changed, and where I've found peace in my body, and where I've decided to evolve with my body and change my body, if you will. And just, off the top of listening, probably hearing about body image and mental health and book launch could be some sticky places in here. And so I want to start by saying that I am not seeking advice from anyone at this time.
Andrew and I have a really powerful support system. I have a super powerful support system, and we will ask for advice or support or suggestions if and when we desire that. But for now, all things considered, all three of those topics, we have some really good pieces to work with, and I'll be sharing some of those today, and some of those I won't be sharing. So, and that's actually, you know what, I'm going to start there. I live a very public life, meaning I'm very open and I share a lot of my process and a lot of my day-to-day on Instagram and social media and here on the podcast and even my book. I've shared before that a lot of the things that I wrote in the book are very vulnerable and also taboo, and it was so beautiful to put all of these stories in one place, but definitely knowing as I published the book that it was going to trigger people, or it could be some of the stories and some of the personal truths could be taken out of context and spun to make me look not good. And I chose to lead with vulnerability, knowing that there's power in that. There's a lot of power and strength in it. And I don't need to be liked by everyone. I don't need to be understood by everyone. That's certainly not why I came here. But I want to address that there's also this piece of what is shared and what isn't, and what is sacred and kept more private and what isn't, and what is the come from of sharing more versus not sharing more. And there have definitely been times in my journey, especially recently as my platform has been growing, and I've also been collaborating with some really incredible individuals, that I've thought of reeling back how much I share with you guys. Because the brighter the light you shine, the more moths you attract, and you don't want to give them any ammunition, right? And I see a lot of creators and influencers do this that are very, 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 very private. And I'm very fortunate that in Austin, there's a lot of like influencers and people and coaches, like incredible coaches, like top polarity coach in the country, top business coach in the country. Like they live here. And some of them are in my friend group. Or are like one person removed, but I, see them all the time, whatever. Or I just hear through the grapevine various things. And so there's a pro to that and there's a con to that. And it's interesting though that what I found is that a lot of these individuals, when I hear more about their personal lives, I am shocked, I'm surprised. Because what they portray is very different than what I'm hearing or seeing. And I think that it's also really important to acknowledge that there's like a double entendre to, not double entendre, what am I trying to say? I have no notes, guys. I'm just completely rocking this out, seeing where it goes. But I personally have generally hired coaches, and I'm always working with, at least one, if not two or three coaches at a time in different parts of my life and business to evolve and to grow. And I've generally hired those individuals because I admired the life that they have, specifically related to the area that I'm seeking support in. So for example, my therapist is epic. She's my couples therapist as well. There are things about her life that I don't aspire to have or be, but in the category of relationship, she is masterful. And so that's where I go to seek support. And I look at her life and her relationships. And I'm very fortunate to have kind of known her before I started working with her in that context. And that's why I hired her for this particular role on my support team, was because I saw her relationships, how she showed up in them, the level of mastery in that particular category. And I was a full yes to that. So where it gets complicated is there's lots of individuals that are teaching about things like relationships, and I hear about their personal relationships and I'm like, oh, like, that's interesting. And that's not to say that they're not qualified to teach on the relationship. I taught, not necessarily, I was never a relationship coach, but I taught about relating before I was married, before I was in relationship. But it can also be complicated. It can be complicated because a lot of these individuals are almost promising a certain result. And if they're not really clear on what their work creates, or their work is not creating the result even for them, it can be challenging. So for example, someone can teach about polarity and they can have lots of they can create, like, they're really good at that. They coach on it. They're great at creating polarity in their relationships. They're great at helping other people create polarity. But why are people wanting to learn polarity in the first place? They're wanting to learn polarity in the first place because they want to have a more epic relationship, usually with a life partner. That's usually why people are doing training such as that. But then that person isn't in a relationship that many would consider like a long-term, or it just isn't, like, it's just not that. And they haven't maintained a long-term relationship or life partnership. And so yes, they are qualified to teach about polarity, but I think that there's also more space for acknowledging what you're actually like putting out there and supporting people with, and what your work will actually create, and not making false promises for what it will create. And witnessing this has illuminated the places where I can be in more integrity and more authentic and more true. And also there can be this like, oh, witnessing people that are more successful as, you know, particularly in business and in coaching, there can be this tendency to be like, well, they're being very conscious and not sharing so much, so should I as well. And particularly around some things that have happened lately, as well as because of the more notoriety and the more my work is being shared, it's a checkpoint moment for me to be curious and cautious about what I share, what I don't share, also how it affects the people in my life, like my husband and, you know, children as well. Those aren't here yet, but I see a lot of individuals in the coaching space in Austin that have kids, and it's kind of a different ball game, you know, in that regard, about what you're going to share and what you're not going to share, because it also affects your children. So I'm not saying that there's a right or a wrong way to share or how much to share. All I'm acknowledging right now is that it's complicated as fuck. It's so complicated to know. And so with that being said, when Andrew and I found out he had bipolar disorder, we were clear that we wanted to share about it, but also we're not sure how much we want to share about the journey. And I've had so many people already, just from a couple of short stories on Instagram, begin asking me so many questions and offer so much support and advice. And it's honestly really overwhelming, and in some cases a little bit unwelcome. Like, I know that the come from is mostly from love and desire to connect, but I think that there's also some shadow pieces in there too. So I just want to acknowledge that as well, and make the request for anyone who's wanting to reach out to me to offer support or advice to first just say, at this point, we have all of the support that we could possibly need. And we're already trying on a lot of things. And at this point, it's almost like when someone suggests something new, I'm like, I can't even receive it right now. That's just the honest truth. Even if it was like the thing that we needed, I'm speaking for myself. And I would say if you want to reach out to Andrew, just ask him consent. But speaking for myself, I don't have the capacity to take on any more even support because I'm already overflowing with it. And that might change over time. But I just want to acknowledge that as well. So, where to now? I'm going to share a bit about my experience of my husband and of our recent revelation with his mental health. It's not for me to share everything. It's his story more than it is mine. And this is a big part of my life right now. And I want to share with you guys. I want to be authentic. I want to be vulnerable. And also, Andrew and I are on the same page that from the get-go of our relationship, we decided that we wanted this relationship to be evidence of what's possible in relating. And this is a part of it. This is absolutely a part of it. And I'm really excited to share some pieces on that as well. But yeah, where do I want to go from here? I'm going to take a little sip of water. So let's get into it. Basically, about 2 weeks ago, Andrew and I had a conflict, and it was the circumstance that in many ways mirrored a lot of other conflicts that we had been having, in which my experience of Andrew was that he acted completely out of character. And in some times and places, this out of character energy has created harm for himself or for others. And yeah, like you don't just get diagnosed with bipolar when everything is fine, right? So I just want to be clear, like ironically, things right before that were amazing. Like our relationship, I'm so proud of our relationship, by the way. And I feel like, it's hard to share about the bipolar because like, I feel like it really casts this negative light on our relationship, or it like people can make their own preconceived notions. But I want to say that I am so proud of our relationship. I love this man till the ends of the earth. I love him more every day. And every relationship has conflict. However, this one particular pattern kept coming up. And I was tracking it from day one. And it was this energy where Andrew would act out of character. And I don't feel like it's my place to share exactly what has happened over the 2 years that we've been together. But I'll share some of the energetics of it and also share a little bit more about the diagnosis, specifically bipolar 2. Maybe I'll start there. Let's start with what is bipolar 2, and then maybe I'll go back a little bit to the timeline. So bipolar 2 there's bipolar 1, there's bipolar 2, and then there's a couple other types of bipolar. Bipolar 1 is the type, and I'm not a doctor, so like, just putting that out there, like I learned all of this information in the last like a week, okay? So bipolar 1 is generally categorized as having super manic episodes, meaning very extravagant, high, more of like a psychotic, like craziness energy. People that are manic will often feel like they're leaving this reality and don't really have a control over it, or they will create a different reality. Sometimes they don't remember what happened during their manic episode. In some ways, the mania, and this goes for bipolar 1 and bipolar 2, those manic episodes can be kind of like, in all honesty, like they can be kind of cool in some ways, because the person that's experiencing it, the person that is bipolar, is really like excited. Like they're really, not always, but a lot of the time it can be like this really like ecstatic energy, this like incredible joy, and like I can do anything, and like it's really beautiful. But it can also be really dangerous. Like that same person that's like, I can do anything, is like, I'm gonna jump off of this cliff. You know, that's like an extreme example, but it's actually not so extreme if you have bipolar 1. Also doing things like insane amounts of drugs, driving a car when you shouldn't, staying up for nights on end and not sleeping. And all of these things just massively are impacting yourself, your own, like, not just your mental health, but also your physical health and all the people around you. So bipolar 1 is mainly categorized by those more manic episodes. It can have the depressive episodes as well, but it's not totally necessary. Bipolar 2 also has a mania related to it. It's called hypermanic. It's usually not as grandiose and intense as bipolar 1 manic episodes, but bipolar 2 also generally definitely has the low depressive episodes. So bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 are both really challenging in their own ways. They both like are worse in some ways and better in other ways. So Andrew has been diagnosed with this bipolar 2. And since being with him, I've seen the instability and the roller coaster of his emotions. And looking back over the past 2 years, now that we have this diagnosis, it makes sense. Like, it makes so much sense. Why there was this acting out of character piece, which now I recognize, oh, that was a manic episode. Pretty much every time we had more intense conflict in our marriage, it was because there was a manic episode. And on the other side, there would be this like intense event usually. And these episodes would generally happen around birthdays, holidays, travel, anniversaries. Anytime there was like an event that had either was physically took a toll, meaning we were traveling, losing sleep, or we were going to be up late partying and like doing things, or it was mentally or emotionally like taking a toll. Like birthdays can be a little like stressful, or like moving's another one. So generally, like, these events would unconsciously trigger Andrew's bipolar. And I was noticing this, and it was really interesting, because after every single time he would take responsibility, and I would own my piece, he would own his piece. And interestingly, even though it took 2 years of our relationship to get to this diagnosis, it was kind of awesome in a way, because the work that we did after each of these events made our marriage so epic, to the point that it was in the in-between periods, it was oh my God, I can't believe this is my life. I can't believe this is my marriage. I'm so grateful. My husband is working so hard on his self-development, and so am I, and we're in it together. And we were running like a well-oiled machine, until something set off his bipolar disorder. And it would seem to come out of nowhere, and it would be so confusing, because it'd be like, well, we've been doing all this work. Why is it not working? And I would be so confused. And interestingly, and so funny, in retrospect, what we've learned is that actually personal development, specifically really intense containers such as retreats or trainings, things like that, can actually be a trigger to the bipolar as well, and to specifically mania. So Andrew's been doing all of these self-development things, and it's also been bringing him up and down and all over the place. And that's not to say that you can't experience these types of containers if you have bipolar or any type of mental illness. It just really helps to know that, so that when you go in, you're tracking yourself, as well as having the support of the team or the facilitators to also know and be able to, be conscious and aware of the potential of your mental illness being triggered. So before he got diagnosed, things were awesome. There was an event that happened, and finally we got on a call with my therapist, and I was like, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, we're doing, what's going on? And then finally our therapist, who's also my personal therapist, she was my therapist first, and then Andrew and I started working with her together about a year ago. And she kind of shared, hey, I've been watching this, I've been tracking this, and I think it's time to look into bipolar 2. So Andrew went to his to a psychiatrist. They were very like clear, this is classic bipolar 2 behavior. You absolutely have bipolar 2. And again, I'm not gonna share, like I'm feeling myself wanting to share more about like the aha moments of what made sense and like things that Andrew has done that it's like, that's bipolar. And a lot of it's actually really good. But I feel like it's his story to tell. And I want to acknowledge, I've been teasing on Instagram and on this podcast for months that I want to do an episode called The Marriage Rebrand, because we've been doing so much work in our marriage to like sort things out and like create this dream marriage, which we've really created aside from this new piece. But we did record a podcast called The Marriage Rebrand like a week before Andrew was diagnosed with bipolar, and it was meant to come out this week. Obviously, once we got this diagnosis, we talked about it and decided to delete that episode entirely because it just didn't have the full information, and we didn't want to come to you guys with something that wasn't totally complete and true. So he's going to come back on. He's going to share more about his experience. But I'll say that a lot of like the qualities of bipolar are actually really attractive. And even the manic is really attractive. There's a lot of self-confidence that comes with it. There's a lot of creativity. So many of the best artists that have lived, the best actors, have a mental illness, and particularly bipolar. So there's that piece. And also, like, when Andrew has been in what I now know to be manic, he's like excited for life and is like charismatic. And it's not that he isn't like that normally, but it's just like, it's a different flavor that's kind of fun. Unfortunately, it's a fine line from that until you get into behaviors that could be seen as self-centered. What are other ways I would describe it? Not completely in touch with reality, saboteur behavior, not being able to just like think critically. So it's good to have this information now so that we can track it, modulate it, and manage it. And right now, how we're managing it looks one way, and I'm not gonna go into that so much because it's very likely that it will change and evolve over time. I'm just trying to feel like what feels like it's my space to share and what doesn't. I feel like complete on sharing about that piece. I just want to share from my own heart a little bit about what this has looked like and meant for me specifically. So it's been hard. It's been really hard to be in a relationship with someone when things can be so unstable and unpredictable. And also acknowledging that despite the instability, the emotional instability and cautiousness that I've had to move with, Andrew excels at life. He has a great job. He is like getting promoted every year. He manages our money impeccably. We have a gorgeous $1 million home that I contributed to, but in all honesty, he paid for probably like 3/4 of it. And he's an amazing partner and teammate, and he's great with my friends and my family, like, and those really high highs, which are often, there's often a piece where trust breaks and trust breaks and trust breaks, and then we've got to rebuild it, and he's so good at rebuilding it, and then we get there, but then there's another episode and then the trust breaks again. And so that's been really, really, really challenging. And it was especially challenging to have one of those episodes happen right as my book was launching. And to be in a space where there's this major trust break, we're figuring out what's going on, I'm healing from that, then find out that my husband has bipolar, and there's so much mixed information about what the management's gonna look like. That's also really difficult, and legitimately, like, our lives will never be the same. Our quality of life is going to completely change. And that doesn't even necessarily mean that it's going to change in a negative way or a positive way. Like, there's things that we're going to have to sacrifice, and there's things that we're going to get because of that sacrifice. So some of the things that we're going to get because of that sacrifice are more regulation and stability, and peace. And some of the things we're having to give up are late nights and plant medicine and, coffee for Andrew, and, like, various other things, which, again, that's his process. I'll let him share a little bit more about that when he wants to, or whatever he wants to share. But so that's been challenging too. And at the same time, it felt like I needed to, like, this book wasn't just about me. The book is its own soul that's wanting to come into the world, and I'm the mom. And in a way, I have to sacrifice myself a little bit to let it come through in this time. And I was at a point where it's like, I can't pause the book launch. Like, it's happening. The baby is coming. I can't do anything about it. And it only gets to be launched once. This isn't something that I'm like, oh, well, like, I can just, like, do it again, like, in a month or whatever. Like, so I really had to, basically, for the week leading up to my book launch, all I did was the things that needed to happen for the book launch, which were mostly around marketing, promoting, and making sure the back end was working and that everything was good to go. And everything else kind of just took a back seat in my life and my business. And I spent a lot of time relaxing and taking care of myself. And that's one thing that I just want to plop here. On the other side of the book launch as well, I took a couple of nights at a hotel in the city. Now, Andrew it had been more than a week since he had got diagnosed and started, his management protocol. And so he was at a place where he felt really good and regulated. And so I shared, I'm kind of, like, feeling like I want to, like, separate myself from the house for a couple of days and just, like, really nurture myself. And he was super supportive. And I think that could be really challenging for people at this time. I know for myself, there was a piece of me that felt like I'm abandoning him in this hard time, and is this okay? And, like, it doesn't really make sense for us to spend money on this right now. And it did. Like, in the end, that's exactly what made the most sense, because on the other side, I came back to the house having processed a lot of the trauma that I had frozen and stuck because I needed to hold it together. And I kind of just got to fall apart for a couple of days and be taken care of and have someone clean my hotel room for me and bring me food on a tray to the bed and go get body work done. And being able to come home with such a full cup is invaluable to our marriage, to each of us individually in our purpose, to our little baby puppy dogs, to our community. And so I just want to drop here, when you prioritize yourself, you're really prioritizing everyone else. Because when you fill yourself up and you take such good care of yourself, you're actually resourced to be able to make hard decisions, have difficult conversations, and also overflow into others and overflow into your relationship and your partnership. So if anyone's listening, my highest recommendation in relationship is to be well nourished. Make sure you're getting enough sleep, make sure you're eating enough food, make sure you're processing your emotions, And if you're not, then figure out what you need to do, whether it be taking space, getting support, or otherwise, to get yourself into that place. Do not make hard decisions and do not have hard conversations if you are not regulated and nourished. So that's my little soapbox there.
Hello, lovers. Please bear with me for a brief interruption with a vulnerable share and offer from my heart. So when I first began my journey with spiritual intimacy and sacred sexuality, all I could afford were books and free podcasts. I was just out of college in my early 20s and honestly very, very broke. And I'm so grateful for all the complimentary, kind words and affordable wisdom that have gotten me where I am today. Price shouldn't deter you from healing. It shouldn't deter you from living the life you love or from reclaiming the most powerful energy in your body. It's my belief that time and commitment are also very powerful investments, especially when you're just dipping your toes in the water. You'll know when it's time to make the bigger cash investments in your journey, but let's begin together today with free love from my heart to yours. As you've already discovered, this podcast is free and it includes so much life-changing wisdom, but I'd also love to guide you to some free offers that are on my website, including a downloadable sexual shadow work workbook and a pleasure positive meditation. Both of these resources are amazing places to start in integrating the tantric principles of expansion and liberation into your life. And you can access these at www.talktantratome.com/free or find a direct link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the episode.
So what does all of this mean on a higher leverage tantric perspective? So we are about to celebrate this weekend. Andrew and I are celebrating our 1-year marriage anniversary, which is really, really exciting and interesting that all of this stuff would happen. And funny enough, the weekend that we got married last year, I had health issues. And now we're a full year later at the end and he's having health issues. So I can say that our marriage in sickness and in health, that has been tested and we are here for it. But it's also been an initiation for me in the work that I do, especially in relation to me being a priestess. You know, I could show up in this circumstance and see myself as the victim. Like Andrew had said to me, he's like, I wish you would have known that I had this before we got married. Like, you have an out. He basically told me, you have an out from this marriage if you want to, which obviously I shared with, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back. I could be a victim to his diagnosis and bear it. Like, now I've got to be this caretaker for life and I've got to deal with my husband's mental illness. I could, see myself as a victim to his impulsive behavior or his emotional range or whatever symptoms come through because of it. But that's not me, and that's not the tantric way, and that's not the priestess path. Instead, I've seen it as one of my deepest initiations into my priestesshood, because it has massively expanded my capacity to love. There is this quality that comes with heartbreak where your heart is broken open so that it can be set right and grow bigger in a way. And that's what's happened. I know that I'm going to be such a better mother after being with him this last year and being so resilient and so trusting. I am so much better for this. I'm so much better as a human, as a woman, as a wife, as a mother, as a businesswoman, as a priestess, as a leader, because of what has happened. There's also this piece on trust, and trust has been a big initiation for me in the last couple of years, really since I began my spiritual journey, because I've been kind of this recovering control freak. Control gives us this illusion of safety. And in reality, the only person that we can truly, authentically trust is ourselves. So when we tell someone, I trust you, in a way, we are actually telling them, you are worthy of my forgiveness. And this is something that I felt and known in my body for a long time, but it was put really beautifully in this book called Inner Marriage by, I'm forgetting the author, but I found this book because Inner Marriage is the topic in my community, the Higher Love Club. It's the topic of the month, balancing the masculine and the feminine within us for inner polarity. Anyways, he talks about trust and forgiveness as well. And he phrased it something like, when you say to someone, I trust you, you're really saying you're worthy of my forgiveness. Because the people that we love in some ways are the most likely to hurt us, because they're the people that we're the most vulnerable with. They're the people that, hold us the most closely and spend the most time with us. And they're also the ones that are our mirrors and are there for our growth. And sometimes growth fucking hurts. And I just really love that, because I've said on this podcast before, there is no one in the world that I trust more than my husband. And I really hope that, most women going into marriage feel the same, but there's also been some of the most massive trust breaks of my life in this marriage. And I recognize that this experience has empowered me to actually trust myself so much more, because the more that you trust others, the more you have to trust yourself, because the more you trust others, the more you are opening yourself up to potential hurt and heartbreak. And so you have to trust that you are going to be able to hold you and get to the other side. And that's what this has done for me. Like, this experience has proven to me that I can trust myself to get myself through anything. I am a resilient woman. I trust myself. I trust God. I trust the divinity in all of this. I'm so here for it. And my devotion to this marriage and to myself in the process even puts me in awe, because I think about Andrew and I think about the fact that he has had bipolar disorder probably his entire life. Speaking to his psychiatrist and talking about the patterns of his life, it's safe to say that it's very likely that he had this his entire life, just looking at his life events. And what has that cost him to have this and have it undiagnosed and unmanaged? And it makes me really sad, actually. Like, it really makes me really sad to think about all of the people that abandoned him or misunderstood him, or even set healthy boundaries, but those healthy boundaries in a way also felt like rejection or pushed him away, when what he really needed was to be held tighter and lifted up. And I feel that my work in Tantra and my devotion to a priestess path has prepared me impeccably to do that. Because in relationship, it can be so easy when someone doesn't meet our expectations or even displays toxic or abusive behavior, which, by the way, we all do. I do it. You've done it. It's not to say that you're a toxic or abusive person. We all just are wounded and we do shitty shit sometimes and we don't even notice it or realize it. And we own it. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you own it, you take responsibility for it, you track it, and more as you grow, you are catching those pieces before they are projected onto someone, right? So there can be, though, this pattern in relationship, especially these days when it's so easy to find someone else to relate with, that when someone breaks your trust or lets you down or displays a behavior that's a red flag, that we immediately cast them off and go to the next. And in a way, I think this is a disservice, and I'm not condoning toxic or abusive behavior, and I also don't think that you should be responsible for calling people forth out of their toxic or abusive behavior. And I also know that not everyone is available for that anyways. All you can do is like plant the seed and hope for the best. However, I chose this man. I chose to marry him. I chose until death do you part. I don't take that lightly. And I trust my decision. I trust that my soul and heart, despite everything that has happened, I know that I am his wife for a reason. I am his priestess for a reason, and I am my own priestess for a reason. And he's an amazing, beautiful human being that I love dearly. And I also knew that I had the capacity, and I had God, spirit, source, my highest self, whatever, on my side to support him in calling him forth. And that's really what this journey is about. I don't think that Andrew would have been diagnosed with bipolar and be in a circumstance where he's managing it if it hadn't been this marriage. Because in every other circumstance, people left, and it was me being like, there's a pattern here. What's going on? There's this pattern, and both of us bringing people in to support to then finally get to a place where it's like, here we go. This makes sense. Okay. So as a priestess, seeing this pattern play out and this is what a priestess does. A priestess sees these things, sees this fear, this energy move through the space, and because she's so grounded and clear and regulated in herself, that she's able to be a pillar and hold unconditional love, to see what's going on and be like, you are not in your highest right now, and I love you, and I love you enough to inspire you, to seduce you even into a greater, grander version of you. And I don't know what that looks like. It's not, as the priestess, it's not my responsibility necessarily to create that transmission, but it's holding space for more of the higher timeline and self to come in and to support that, and to support, in this case, my husband, and to use discernment and a mix of both that unconditional, feminine, accepting love alongside the more masculine, okay, and also like, I will not tolerate this. What do we need to do to evolve and grow? And that's the balance, right? That's like the balance of, a lot of the tantric path is about, finding and empowering your inner masculine and your inner feminine so that you come to the world as a whole human, and then are able to have this intermarriage of sorts, and use both of those energies to create better and more beauty and love in the world, to create more love in the world. That's the best way to put it. And to inspire others into their own wholeness too, right? So that's really what this did for me, and how I've shown up for it, and how I was able to get through it. It wasn't like seeing that I'm responsible for the transformation. It was about being the space holder for the transformation to happen, and knowing that we have all of this support, both spiritually and physically, to get the answers and get the clarity, really to get the clarity. And that's really what this season of life has been about. It's been a season of clarity. And so I want to acknowledge that I truly believe that each and every woman, especially, and men too, but I work with the priestess archetype, I work primarily with women. And it's my belief that every woman has a priestess that resides within her, and she's courageously standing for the highest love, not just for herself to be loved by a beloved, to be chosen, but also for the beloved and for her community and ultimately for the world, knowing that her love is so powerful that it's radiating out to everyone in her orbit, and they're impacted by it and inspired by it, and then that's really what changes the world. In ancient times, these priestesses, when men went off to war, they would come back, the warriors, and instead of going straight home to their families, they would come to the temple and they would meet with the priestess. And in some cases, there was a sensual or even erotic tone to it, and in other times there weren't. But essentially, the idea was after the hardness of war, they would come to the priestess first, because the priestess would help bring them back into their hearts, into their truth, into their love, so that when they went home to their family, they were actually able to be men in society that were in balance in their archetypes. And so she would, in some cases, actually expand her auric field to encompass and do tantric body work to de-armor him. And I see that as a big piece of what I've done in my marriage. You know, Andrew, in a way, was at war with himself and also at war with the society that has such intensely high expectations of who and what we need to be to succeed. And that also creates a lot of dysregulation and potentially triggers mental illness. And so my role in that as his wife, as his partner, is to be that priestess. And I also do this for clients on the day-to-day, both virtually and in person. It's a part of the tantric body work that, you know, really got me into this work in the first place. So I just want to put that out there and say that if you're a woman that's listening to this and are interested in this type of path and this type of devotion to a higher love, I recommend checking out the Pleasure Priestess, which is my year-long mastermind for women that are, you know, wanting to explore the energetics of being a tantrika, whether it's more for themselves, whether it's to, you know, actually start a business or bring this perspective into their business, or whether it's to bring this to your beloved and your partnership and your marriage. The Pleasure Priestess path is a really, really, really amazing place to start. It's online and in person. The link to check it out is in the show notes. So that took a lot longer to talk about than I thought. So we don't have a ton of time left, but I do want to talk about a couple other things. You know, honestly, the book launch was great. The book launch was really great. I'm just pulling up, I don't need to pull up any notes. Actually, I am going to pull up my notes. I said I didn't have notes, but I have like a note. I have a note that I have that I'm going to pull up. So here it is. Okay. Oh yes, book launch and then body image, macros. Okay. So I'm going to touch on the book launch briefly. Thank you guys so much for buying the book. I am so honored. It's been such a joy to see your guys's little images on Instagram, like snapping you reading the book. Please keep doing that. I love that. I'll reshare it. Thank you for leaving reviews on Amazon. Please keep doing that. I love it. It means so much. And it also helps the book reach more people because it tells Amazon, like, people are liking this book. It is important. The world needs this book. And then they keep promoting it. But the book launch was so fun. I had the most epic party with oysters and champagne, and we spanked each other with roses, and I read from my book. And despite everything that was happening at the time, it was one of the best nights of my life. It was so fun, and it was actually exactly what I needed. I was really worried going into it because I felt like, you know, this was a time with my book launch where I felt like I was going to be able to have more support. Like I thought I was going to be able to lean on Andrew more. And in fact, it was the opposite, where in fact, I couldn't lean on him at all. And also, I then had to take on more responsibility. We had literally just gotten a puppy, and I kind of had to take full responsibility of potty training this puppy and taking care of the puppy. And it's like having a little baby, and I had this book baby, and it was a lot. So I was really worried going into the book launch, because generally when I do events, I want to be like so relaxed and regulated. And I did my best. But honestly, the celebration was such medicine, and I'm so grateful that I had amazing friends and others supporting me to make it really, really magical and beautiful. There are going to be some more launch events. Check out the events link, which will be in the show notes, or you can find it at talktantratome.com/events. If you buy the book, you get a free ticket to the virtual launch party. So you can claim, there are a few bonuses. If you buy the book, you get a ticket to the launch party, and you also get a month free in my membership, the Higher Love Club. You claim those bonuses by going to talktantratome.com/book, put in your order number and your email, and then it will bring you to a page that has the date and time for the virtual launch party and how to access it, as well as the code to get a free month in the Higher Love Club. As soon as you join the Higher Love Club with this free month, you also get over 30 hours of tantric teachings on all kinds of subjects, including, I've been talking about, masculine and feminine on the call. There's content on that. There's content on prosperity and abundance and how to have sacred sex and expanding your orgasmic potential and inner child. There's so much amazing stuff. And it's free when you buy the book, which is only $22. So definitely do that. I hope to see you guys all at the launch party. There's also going to be a sacred sex play party here in Austin in August, as well as a workshop in LA. The difference between those, a play party is more all out, sex can happen. There's a little bit of facilitation at the beginning. There's an episode of the podcast, I don't remember the number, but it's called Play Party 101. If you're curious or a little nervous, listen to that. We'll probably answer all your questions. And then the workshop in LA is a little bit more sexiness. We're gonna be wearing lingerie, sensual vibes, sensual exercises, but no penetrative sex, or it's gonna be more tantric touch, pink tantra. So that's that. Okay, let's get into this final thing. I really wanna talk about this today, but I'm gonna try to make it a little bit brief. Body image and tracking my macros. So we had bipolar, book, body image, the 3 B's. I feel like that should be a song. Bipolar, body image, book. I just did it in that voice of, I'm looking for a man in finance. Okay. So, body image. I have had body dysmorphia my entire life. And I've struggled with it to varying degrees. You could say that I had an eating disorder, although it was never diagnosed. But when I was in the modeling, I was underweight. According to my BMI was unhealthy. But I never went to a doctor about it. I never had bulimia, but I did have some anorexic tendencies. I wasn't eating well or properly or enough for years of my life. And I'm really grateful that I found Tantra and self-love, and also the world is becoming more inclusive of curviness and showing more, models that are plus size. And I think it's so freaking awesome, and it's helped me heal a lot. But still, there's only been, I'm in this place in my life where I'm getting a little older. I'm 30, it's not that old, but body starts to change, right? And I've always been once I kind of left the anorexic tendencies behind, and I mainly my thing has been, trying to move my body almost every day. But the types of movement that I was doing were more walking and yoga. So I never really did any high intensity workouts, which was really good for me, especially, earlier, because I was so anxious. I have a more anxious, what's the word? I tend to operate a little bit more, I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of right now, but I didn't really need any high intensity stuff. Let's just say that. I was already a little high strung and so that worked for me until I got to a place where I was regulated enough, which I talked about a little bit on the podcast. Last year, I started doing lifting weights and, and more recently I started doing CrossFit, and it makes sense in this season of my life because I'm way more regulated and my body can actually handle a little bit more of that high intensity exercise. But really over the past like 7-8 years, like I've always eaten really healthy. I kind of left most of those more anorexic tendencies behind. Those were more in my like teens and early 20s. And I've eaten healthy. Like I've always eaten, you know, lots of like grass-fed ribeye and, you know, salad with olive oil dressing and vegetables cooked in grass-fed butter and like just like whole foods, like lots of like really good whole raw cheddar, like whole foods, raw, organic, like all of that. And I've always had like things wrong with my gut though too. Like I don't want to get into like TMI details, but like it's gotten a lot better over time, but I'd always had like this kind of like, it's not perfect. Like my poops, this is taboo talk. So I'm just gonna say, my poops could be better than this. Like, I just know it. I used to have like really, really bad IBS, and that has gotten infinitely better. Things that helped along the way were I did Ayurvedic diet for a while. That helped a lot. I did a candida cleanse. That helped a lot. I did paleo for a while. That helped a lot. But there was still more that I was like, that still is not quite right. So anyways, I turned 30 and I put on some weight, and I like I didn't change anything. Like I wasn't not exercising anymore. My diet was the same. The only thing that I could say is like actually like my stress went down. And so part of it, I thought maybe it's because my body feels safer to hold weight and I'm not as anxious and stressed. And it's like actually like it went from, I actually in some ways started to feel healthier, but then it started to get like more and more. Like the first like 5 pounds I gained, I was like, this actually feels good. This feels healthy. But then I gained like 5 more pounds and I was like, this doesn't feel good. This is really triggering my body image issues. Like, yeah, I just wasn't happy with my body. And it would depend on the day too. Like it would depend on the day, but overall it was like, okay, something's off. So I started eating more protein and I started going to CrossFit, and that helped a bit. Like that definitely helped tone up some things, but I wasn't losing any weight. And I'm gonna be clear, like I wanted to lose weight. I wanted to lose those extra 5 pounds. And I think that this is like a really healthy conversation to have, because I think so many people would say, but you look great and like you're so healthy and like this and that. But I also knew deep down that like it wasn't the healthiest weight for me. And like overall, like I just didn't feel like I had the energy that I could have. And like, so I think it's really easy in this time where there's a lot more acceptance and unconditional love, which is very feminine and awesome, and the world really needs that. But there's also a place where the masculine gets to come in and say, okay, I've accepted this, and if this is the reality of my body or whatever the circumstance is, I'm okay with it. But is there something I could do about it that could actually make things better holistically? And that's really the place that I got to. I was like, okay, like if this really is like healthy weight, great, but I want to play around with some things because I'm just like sensing that, yeah, it could be better. So there was this one particular day where I'd been doing all the CrossFit, I'm eating healthy, I was eating more protein, and I just like looked in the mirror and I was like, that doesn't look right. Like, and I cried. I cried about it. I went and I sat in Andrew's lap and I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm doing the things. Like, you see me, I'm doing it. Why isn't it working? And it's kind of frustrating because I think this is true for a lot of men, not all men. But I mean, actually, I can't even say, I'm not even going to say men. This is true for a lot of humans. And in all honesty, it was true for me for a lot of my life. But Andrew can eat whatever he wants. And he looks awesome. Like, he looks so ripped and hot. Like, he's binging, you know, and part of this is probably bipolar, but binging ice cream, you know, like eating like 2 pints of ice cream in a night. And I'm like, I don't eat that much. And so anyways, he had suggested that I start tracking my macros. And I was like, no, like only like really intense gym people track their macros. Only like bodybuilders track their macros. And he's like, all right, just up to you, just a suggestion. So I'm like, I'm gonna give it a try. So I download this app where you put in what you eat and it tells, and you put in your weight and how much weight you want to lose, and like, how fast do you want to do it? And so I put all the information in, and then it tells you how much, and macros, by the way, if you're new to this, because I didn't know this, macros are like your macronutrients, meaning your protein, your fat, and your fiber intakes. And it tells you, this app specifically will tell you how many grams of protein you should have, how many grams of fat, and how many grams of fiber, considering your goals and considering your current weight. So I put that in, I started tracking, and I was shocked by the results. One day in, I felt so much better in my body. A week in, I lost a couple pounds. I was like, what? Like, and I remember before I would go to bed, and at the end of every day, it was like I was pregnant. Like I would wake up in the morning and I'd be like relatively thin, but by the end of the day, I was so bloated and like inflamed internally that it looked like I was pregnant. And what I found out was that I was at that point, I was eating enough protein, because I had mentioned even before I started tracking my macros, I started eating more protein, but I was way under eating my fiber and way over eating fat. Remember how I said I was eating ribeyes and, vegetables with olive oil and like, raw cheese. And like, I had kind of like almost taken on this keto lifestyle without intending to, but it's because like those foods are healthy. Like people like on Instagram right now are like, butter is a superfood. And I don't disagree with that, but it definitely wasn't working for me and my body. All of the oil and the fat, even though it was like healthier fats, were not working for me. And so yeah, this tracking macros. So I'm just gonna put that out there. I highly recommend doing it. I feel my poops have gotten better. Bringing that back in, my poops have gotten, like, I've never had better poops in like probably since I was like 15. So I'm feeling really good about my poops. I lost this weight. So it's like, that's how you know when it's like, I just think there's this piece with like gaining weight and your body changing, and like where you want to accept that this is what your body looks and feels like, and have that unconditional love, which is the feminine, but also empowering your inner masculine to say, hey, let's get curious about how we can use this as material for liberation and growth and evolution. And like, honestly, like if I hadn't gained those 5 pounds, I probably never would have tracked my macros, and I probably would still have this really internal inflamed state. So how can I discern and learn and grow from the circumstances and the challenges that are in my life and in my body right now? I think that a lot of people, like, they gain weight and they're like, well, like self-love, like it's fine. And yes, and it's worth getting curious about, is there something that's like, this is a symptom of your body trying to tell you, like, I'm not happy with the way things currently are. Can we shift diet? Can we shift movement? I'm almost done, babe. Sorry, running late with hubby. But anyways, so that's about it. I just wanted to put that out there as another thing that I've struggled with, because I know that I'm not alone in struggling with body image, and this is a very common issue. And I wanted to share something that worked for me and how I used that to create more health and liberation in my life, because I truly feel so much better. As I mentioned, I just got back from a weekend of staying downtown and ordering room service, and I tried a little bit to eat according to my macros, but I did not track it, and I did not do my best at all. And I just 2 nights, and I could totally tell I lost my energy. My poops got weird again. I like felt all bloated, and like I feel like I'm still recovering from it. So just putting that out there. And again, this is about balancing the inner masculine, inner feminine, and this is something that I teach very prevalently in my work, and has been the focus of the last couple of months in the Higher Love Club membership. And this week, I forgot the exact date, but we're doing a live class on inner union, on balancing the inner feminine and the inner masculine. And again, if you buy the book, you get to join us for free. So buy the book and then join the free call. And I hope to see you more in the membership. It's such a great value. We have calls every month. And yeah, it's amazing. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for tuning in today for this taboo conversation. Sending you all so much love. Have a sexy and spiritual day, and I'll catch you next time. Ta-ta.
Oops, just kidding. Still here. I have one last thing for y'all. I want to say that the internet is a really, really special place. It's why we're all here right now. And many of us, including me, wouldn't have discovered Tantra or sacred sexuality if it weren't for this nifty invention of the 20th century. And almost none of you would have found my work and my vision without it. I love the internet, and I deeply desire to expand beyond it, to experience more real life love, community, and connection. So I invite you to check out upcoming Tantra events at www.talktantratome.com/events, or click the link in the show notes. I can't wait to give you a big squeeze in real life. Okay, now that's it. Ta-ta for real. Ta-ta.